we need to keep our eye on the Ukraine.
Yep.
Just because Vladimir Putin has sworn that he's going to get his revenge, he's going to strike back for all of the economic sanctions that have been levied against him. And there are two important things that have occurred in the world in the last 2 weeks that have not gotten any coverage in the West. And one was that there was a meeting of the BRIC nations. That's Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And the heads of those four governments all got together. Well, what were they talking about? What kind of policy decisions did they conclude with? Well, frankly, I don't know. I haven't had a chance to research it because it just hasn't made the headlines. But it's definitely something that's going to have an impact on your life and mine. And in addition, the BRIC nations got together and founded their own bank to operate as an alternative to the International Monetary Fund, to the international banks that we associate with our values in the West. Now, look, we do have different values than the BRIC nations have. We value what we call human rights. We think those are universal. They're not. Human rights is a set of ideas, and we believe in them strongly. But not all people agree with those ideas. The jihadists don't believe in those ideas at all. In fact, they laugh at them as being satanic. Mm-hmm. And the folks from BRIC have a hard time with those basic human rights, too. Look what Vladimir Putin thinks of, and does, to LGBT, to lesbian, gay, and whatever it is, people. He won't tolerate them in his country. So it is very wise to be aware of different civilizations with different value systems and their maneuvers for power, because those may have a big impact on your life and mine.
You know, talking about President Putin and his retaliation against the economic sanctions, it reminds me of earlier this year, I believe it was in July, where it was found out that Russian hackers had managed to slip a digital bomb into the NASDAQ.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, one problem, look, I have a collaborator in Moscow. I don't mean he's a war collaborator. Mm-hmm. He is a collaborator in theoretical physics, and he's at the Kaldych Institute of Applied Mathematics of the Russian Academy of Sciences. And what he points out over and over again is that Russia has a lot of just flat-out brilliant people, and they could be used to provide flat-out brilliant solutions to the problems of the world. They could be used to provide the next iPads and the next iPhones and the next things that are going to give us new powers beyond belief. But they're not being used that way because Vladimir Putin is so focused on oil money that he has neglected the biggest natural treasure of Russia, mm-hmm. which is human minds, human creativity. And you see that creativity popping out in, guess what? Criminality. If it doesn't have a legitimate place to go, it shows up in a criminal place. Now, if you try to start an entrepreneurial business in Russia, we're very big on serial entrepreneurs starting businesses. But if you try to start a business in Russia and it shows any signs of success, a couple of very big guys show up to your office one day and say, we'd like to buy half of your company. Well, really, it's more like 60%, and the price they offer is extraordinarily low. But they try to get across to you that they're not really there just to tell you they want to buy your company, but if you don't sell them half of your company or more, something very nasty will happen to you. And those are Putin's thugs. And so that is taking the creativity of the Russians that could be contributing to the whole being, the well-being of you, me, and the world, and it is throwing it down the toilet and turning it into something criminal.
Now, is there any possibility, Howard, that what we're seeing in between Israel and Gaza is a diversion? Get all our attention focused on Israel and the Gaza Strip in order for...
it is a diversion. You're absolutely right. And there was no Arab identity when T.E. Lawrence was posted to the Middle East back in 1915. And in 1916, he caught hold of an idea that others had been generating, which was since the British needed to defeat the Axis powers in World War I, one of those Axis powers was Turkey. And one way to defeat Turkey would be to pry away some of its citizens and turn them against the Turks. Mm-hmm. And the idea for doing that was the idea of forming something that really didn't exist at that particular moment in time, a sense of Arab identity, a sense of Arab nationalism. And T.E. Lawrence worked very, very, very hard to manufacture that artificial sense of Arab nationalism. Then in 1942, the British helped pull together something they called the Arab League. It included Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. And again, they were trying to infuse a sense of Arab identity in order to control the Middle East. And it worked. But what did those people in the Arab League start putting out? Pamphlets that said World War I or World War II was caused by the Jews. Why? Because they had a puppet named Adolf Hitler, and they used Adolf Hitler to gain sympathy so they could take over Israel. In other words, Israel was always the one unifying thing between a bunch of nations that weren't really nations, that were relatively recent creations, that had no sense of common unity, and that desperately needed a sense of common unity. Anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, anti-Israelism were very, very handy ploys for these things. In fact, as we said, there's an Islamic world of 57 nations. It's 13,500 miles wide. It disagrees about just about everything in the world. When it needs unity, what does it use to get that unity? The Palestinian plight, how the poor Palestinians are being mercilessly treated by the Israelis with no mention of what the Palestinians are doing, sending 3,000 rockets into Israel, which is what they've done over the course of the last month. No mention at all. And it has worked. The person that I'm debating with on my Facebook site right now is Yusuf Hussein. Yusuf, if I haven't got him mixed up with somebody else, Yusuf is a friend of mine from Pakistan. He was the head of the Pakistani Software Association during a period of time in which the Pakistani software industry doubled in size. The Pakistanis are not Arabs, and yet they have been pulled into this sense of common unity with the rest of the Islamic Ummah, the rest of the Islamic family, the rest of the body of the Islamic world by this antipathy, this hatred of Israel, and this rabid support, with a lot of facts missing, of the folks of the so-called Palestinians.
When will it all end?
Well, here's a real problem. Here we have decreased the amount of violence in the world by a factor of 10. It's actually a factor of 9, to be more precise, in 350 years. And we don't know how we've done it, because we don't even recognize that we've done it. My book, The Lucifer Principle, brought this fact up, and the original edition was published in 1995. That's almost 20 years ago. Then Steven Pinker, bless his soul, wrote a 650-page book on the same theme, The Better Angels of Our Nature. It's brilliant, and brought so much research to the fore to show you that we have increased our peace by a factor of 9, that it's absolutely ridiculous. But it's not a part of the common vocabulary. You don't hear friends standing around a cocktail party saying, well, we increased the factor of peace, or we increased peace by a factor of 9, and when people don't discuss it, they don't find out what its cause is. When they don't find out what its cause is, it continues to be an accident. And when you know what the cause is, then you can begin to inflict peace on the world.
But are there nations on this planet who cannot live peacefully?
Well, Islam, militant, radical Islam, jihadist Islam, sees the world as being perpetually at war between Dar al-Islam, the House of Islam, and Dar el-Harb, the land of the foreigner, which also translates to the land of war. And it is said in Islamic circles, with direct quotes from the Quran, that if you just sit on your couch and watch TV and send a bunch of donations to jihadist groups, you are not going to go to heaven. That unless you get off that comfortable seat of yours and go and join the jihad and kill people in order to spread the light of Islam, you will not make it to paradise. So, yes, there is a religion that is predicated on perpetual war, and it is Islamist religion.
So what would happen if all the countries of the world decided, you know what, we're not going to allow any more Muslims into our country?
Well, that wouldn't stop. Wouldn't stop the Muslims. It would stop them. You know, there's a guy named Ali Mazrui, and Ali Mazrui is considered a great figure speaking on behalf of peace in the West. He's been made the head of a peace institute at the State University of New York, somewhere in New York State. And he was given the money to do a 12-part television show in the 1980s called The Africans. But Ali Mazrui wrote an article in a demographics magazine, in a magazine about population shifts, a magazine so specialized that nobody was ever going to see it. And Ali Mazrui said, look, we Muslims make war through competitive procreation. In other words, you have 3 kids, I'll have 13 kids. What does that accomplish? Well, over the course, he pointed out in this article that it meant that the Muslims started out in Africa when they first fled, a small batch of Muslims who were direct followers of Muhammad. Muhammad sent them to Africa for safety because the town of Mecca really was going to come down heavily on the Muslims. Well, that tiny little group, Ali Mazrui points out, now owns half of Africa. How? Through competitive procreation, through outbreeding the non-believers, and through something else that he calls the procreational jihad. Jihad, by having as many children as you can with 4 wives and as many women who you can take by the right hand as you can get your hands on. Because every child born to an Arab father is considered a Muslim. Every child born to a Muslim father is considered a Muslim. So it's a great way of spreading your ideas by spreading your genes. But it's not necessarily conducive to peace. And we're not supposed to talk about it because it's said that when we talk about it, we're being Islamophobic and racist. Well, Ali Mazrui is not racist and he's not Islamophobic. He's a Muslim.
So basically what you're saying, Howard, if I understand you right, is that there's nothing we can do about it.
Well, we could try to restrict the number of Muslims living in our countries, but that doesn't feel right to me. I'd have to think about that for a long time. I mean, my Muslim friends are incredibly valuable to me. But what we can do is be aware of jihadist Islam. Okay, here's a simple prescription. Let's give everybody in the military a copy of the book, The Muhammad Code, so that they can understand where this all comes from in the very tradition of Muhammad himself, because Muhammad established most of these ideas, which makes them holy. Any person to be righteous, honorable, and just in the Muslim world is supposed to follow the example of Muhammad step by step by step. And Muhammad, he generaled 67 military campaigns. He personally led 27 of those military campaigns, and he took something like, according to the Universal Sunnah Foundation in Saudi Arabia, he took something like 300 square miles a day in conquest. Now, that's a tradition we need to know about, and not because we need to blame our pluralist, modernist friends for that tradition. They don't even know it. They don't believe it exists. But we need to understand the jihadists, because they're going to be with us. They've been with us for almost 1,400 years now, making war against us, and they are going to be around for another batch of hundreds of years to come.
All right, Howard, stand by. Good friend, you and I have to take our final break. Howard Bloom is our guest this hour, www.howardbloom.net. He's the author of the Muhammad Code, and it's available at Amazon.com. My name is Rob McConnell. I'll be back on the other side of this short break as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. With each new extreme weather event or terrorist act, it becomes increasingly obvious that we live in uncertain and challenging times. We all buy car insurance. Why not collapse and catastrophe insurance? Matthew Stein, an MIT-trained engineer and green builder, has written 2 outstanding books to help people prepare, plan for, and deal with everything from minor situations lasting a few days to full-on collapse. Matt's first book, When Technology Fails, is a manual for self-reliance, sustainable living, and surviving the long emergency. This massive book covers the gamut from first aid and emergency preparedness to alternative healing, renewable energy, primitive living skills, and 18th century technologies that could be critical to your comfort and survival in a long-lasting crisis. Matt's second book, When Disaster Strikes, is a comprehensive emergency preparedness handbook and survival guide. When Disaster Strikes is an essential item for every family's go bag. Both books are available at all usual sources. There's a wealth of totally free information posted at whentechfails.com, and author-signed copies may be purchased at mattstein.com. That's www.whentechfails.com and www.mattstein.com.